I was around 21 at the time and had just dropped out of college. Life felt like it was in limbo, and I was picking up whatever short-term jobs I could find to cover rent and groceries. That's how I stumbled across the farmhouse listing on Craigslist. The ad was simple, almost too simple. A couple needed someone to house-sit their property for a week while they visited family. No pets, no real chores. Just lock up at night and keep an eye on the place. Sounded easy enough. I messaged them the same day, curious but not expecting much. To my surprise, they replied within a few hours. We set up a quick phone call. The woman, Megan, was polite and sounded older, maybe mid-40s. She gave me the address and told me that everything I'd need would be written down at the house. She also mentioned that the property was a bit isolated, about 20 minutes off the main road. That didn't bother me. In fact, it sounded peaceful. Quiet. A nice change of pace. I arrived on a Sunday afternoon. The house was exactly what I expected, a white, two-story farmhouse with a big wraparound porch. An old barn sat behind it, leaning slightly with age. The entire property was surrounded by trees. It was the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. Megan and her husband had already left by the time I got there. Just like she'd said, a spare key was tucked under a flat stone near the porch steps. Inside, the house was clean and well kept. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Homey. There were a few handwritten notes stuck to the fridge, one with the Wi-Fi password, another with the alarm code, and a third with emergency contact numbers. I spent most of the first day unpacking a small bag, wandering around the house to get a feel for it, and watching old TV shows on my laptop. The hours passed quietly. That night, I locked all the doors, double-checked the windows, and settled into the guest room upstairs. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. But I figured I'd get used to it. And with that, the first day came to an uneventful end. It was colder than I expected, but the house felt safe. Comfortable, even. The second day passed much like the first. I wandered around the property a bit, taking a few pictures of the old barn. I watered the indoor plants, just like Megan's note had said. I remember thinking to myself, this might be the easiest money I've ever made. That night, I was brushing my teeth in the upstairs bathroom when I heard something. Movement outside. It sounded like footsteps on gravel. I paused and leaned toward the window, brushing the curtain aside. I didn't see anyone, just the dark outline of the yard and the trees beyond it. I figured it was probably a deer. Or maybe a raccoon. Nothing to worry about. So I shut off the bathroom light and went to bed. It was on the third day that things began to shift. I remember the time exactly, it was around 11 in the morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee, still a little groggy, when I noticed someone approaching the house. He was walking up the long gravel driveway. A man, probably in his late 50s. He wore jeans, a dark jacket, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. I stood there for a moment, watching from the kitchen window, trying to decide what to do. He reached the front steps and knocked. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain lock in place. "Hey," he said, with a slight nod. "I'm from down the road. Just figured I'd check in. Saw a car here and figured you might need help with something." His voice was calm. Casual. I told him I was just house-sitting for the owners, and that everything was fine. He nodded again, then looked out over the yard, like he was surveying the land. "All right," he said after a pause. "Just thought I'd say hello. Sometimes people need help out here." I thanked him politely, then closed the door and locked it. From the window, I watched him walk back down the driveway. He didn't get into a car. He just kept walking, slowly, until he disappeared beyond the trees. At first, I didn't think much of it. But something about the whole thing felt off. I couldn't explain why. Just a feeling that lingered. So, I decided to text Megan just to be sure. "Do you have a neighbor down the road? A guy came by this morning saying he lives nearby." It took almost an hour for her to respond. That felt strange. "No, no one lives close," she wrote back. "Our closest neighbor is a couple of miles down, and they're elderly. They never walk up this far." I asked if the man had said his name. She said no. Megan told me to keep the doors locked and to call her if anything else weird happened. That evening, I kept checking the window every time I passed it. But nothing else happened the rest of the day. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man hadn't just been passing by. That night, I left a few lights on before going to bed. I woke up sometime after 2 in the morning. There was a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to pull me out of sleep. At first, I stayed still and listened. Then I heard it again, a faint metallic rattle, like a handle being tested. I sat up and waited. The sound came again, clearer this time. It was coming from the back door near the kitchen. I got out of bed slowly and moved toward the hallway. I didn't turn on any lights. The house was dark except for the soft glow from the front hallway light I'd left on. From the top of the stairs, I could see a small slice of the kitchen through the doorway. The back door wasn't visible from there, but I could hear movement, something other than footsteps. Then, suddenly, it stopped. I stood there for at least a minute, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to overreact, but I also didn't want to ignore what I was hearing. Finally, I went back to the bedroom and grabbed my phone. There was no signal. I had noticed before that reception was weak inside the house, so I moved to the front window near the entry and stood close to the glass. I called the local sheriff's number. The phone rang several times before someone finally picked up. I gave them the address and explained that someone might be outside trying to get in. They told me a unit would be sent, but it could take some time because of the distance. I waited in the front room, watching the road. Just before 3 a.m., I saw headlights approaching. I stepped outside and explained everything again. One of the deputies walked around the house with a flashlight while the other asked me more questions. After about 10 minutes, the first deputy returned. He said someone had definitely been at the back door. The ground was soft from recent rain, and there were clear footprints leading in from the woods. The footprints stopped right at the back entrance. Then the deputies told me something else. They had found a man walking near the edge of the field behind the house. He wasn't carrying a flashlight, and he didn't seem to be going anywhere in particular. When the deputies approached him, he didn't run. He told them he was out for a walk and claimed he lived nearby. One of the deputies asked to see identification. But the man didn't have any. He gave a name, but it didn't match any local records. When asked which house was his, he gave a vague description that didn't line up with any property in the area. They brought him to the front of the house and asked if I recognized him. It was the same man who had come to the door earlier that week. Same jacket. Same cap. He didn't look at me. He just stood near the patrol car with his hands in his pockets, saying he had been checking on things. After a few minutes, they told me they would be taking him in for further questioning. They didn't explain much else. One of the deputies stayed back and walked me through the property again. He pointed out where they had found the footprints and confirmed that no damage had been done to the door. Before they left, they asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else for the night. I said no. I had already locked every window and door and didn't want to leave the house unattended. They gave me their direct contact number and told me to call if anything else happened. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the front room with the porch light on until the sky began to lighten. Later that morning, I received a call from Megan. She had already spoken to the sheriff's department. She apologized repeatedly and offered to end the house sitting early. But I told her I'd finished the week as planned. After my stay ended, I drove straight home. I never returned to that part of the state. This happened in late September, about 2 years ago. At the time, I was 25, living alone in an apartment just outside Chicago. I'd been working as a mechanic at a local auto shop, but the place closed down suddenly. So, I needed temporary work to cover my rent. While searching Craigslist, I found a simple job offer. A man on a remote property in northern Michigan needed someone experienced with trucks to help fix an old one. In exchange, he offered a place to sleep and meals. I didn't think about it much. I just packed my tools into my truck and left early the next morning. The property was isolated, about 5 miles from the nearest town. It had a 2-story white farmhouse and an open field behind it. The man who hired me was named Dale. He looked to be in his late 50s and wore work clothes. He showed me the small guest room, pointed out the well pump, and mentioned there was no cell signal inside. He said I could look at the truck whenever I was ready. Then he went back inside without saying much else. I spent the first night organizing my things and walking the perimeter of the property. Around midnight, I heard faint noises near the side of the house. Something light brushed past the outer wall, followed by dry snapping sounds. I stayed awake for a while but didn't investigate. I assumed it might be some animal or something. The next morning, I started by checking the truck again. It was an old pickup, not in great shape. Some parts had been pulled apart, and the wiring under the hood was damaged. I made a list of what I needed and planned to drive to the nearest parts store the next day. Nothing happened the rest of that day. But at night, I heard footsteps across the porch, then silence. When I looked outside, the yard was empty. Later, I asked Dale if there were animals around the property. He said, sometimes deer come close, but nothing to worry about. He didn't ask why I was asking. He just nodded and went back to stacking wood. That night, I made sure to lock every door and close all the windows. I stayed in the living room reading until past midnight. Around 1 a.m., I thought I saw something through the window. A shape near the edge of the yard, standing still. I stood up, but it was gone before I reached the glass. I didn't sleep much after that. I left the lights on again and waited for morning. I had only been there 2 days, but I already wanted to leave. So, I decided to finish the job and leave first thing the next morning. I worked all day. I replaced the truck's battery and repaired enough wiring to start the engine. Dale stayed near the house, quiet as usual. He didn't mention anything, and neither did I. By sunset, I had finished most of the repairs. I locked the barn carefully and returned to the farmhouse. Dale was already in his room. I double-checked all the doors and windows. Then, I turned on a few extra lights and sat down in the living room to wait out the night. Around midnight, I heard the porch steps creak again. The sound came closer, moving along the porch until it reached the window. I stood up and moved to the window to look out. Just beyond the glass, I saw a face, pale, thin, and staring directly at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then suddenly, the figure stepped back into the yard. It was tall and unnaturally thin. I watched until the figure disappeared around the corner. Nothing else happened after I saw the face outside, but I was certain someone had been watching me through the window. The next morning, I stepped outside and checked around the window carefully. I didn't find footprints or any clear signs. Dale was already up, stacking wood near the barn. I walked over and told him what I'd seen. I explained exactly about the face at the window and someone standing near the house. Dale listened but didn't seem concerned. He told me it was probably nothing and said I was likely just tired from working late. When I tried again to convince him, he shook his head. He repeated that nobody ever came to the property and suggested I was imagining things. He continued working and didn't look at me again. I finished the last few repairs on the truck. Then, I put my tools away, packed my belongings into my car, and left without saying another word. During the drive home, I thought about everything that had happened over the last few nights. And I knew exactly what I had seen. Now, I didn't know if Dale truly didn't believe me or just didn't want to. Either way, I wasn't going back. After what happened, I stopped accepting jobs from strangers, especially if they had anything to do with a farmhouse. In November 2021, I moved in with my boyfriend. He owns an old trailer. From the first day, I felt like something was off about the place. It felt like there was something there, watching, maybe, but not trying to hurt anyone. It didn't feel evil. In fact, for a while, it seemed like whatever it was didn't even want me to know it was there. I've always had a strong sense for things like this. Ever since I was a kid, I noticed things that other people didn't: footsteps when no one's around, shadows that move, or objects being in the wrong place. Sometimes, I'd hear knocking, soft but clear. And always from a part of the trailer where no one was. There were nights when I'd find cabinets or doors wide open, even though I knew I had closed them. I've also seen shadows out of the corner of my eye, always gone the moment I tried to look directly at them. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe I was just tired. But deep down, I knew better. Then something happened a few months ago that I still think about. My boyfriend and I were in the bedroom getting ready to sleep. The lights were low, and we had just gotten into bed. I got up to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Our trailer has a narrow hallway, and from the kitchen you can see straight down to the end of that hallway, right where our bedroom door is. As I was filling my cup, I looked up and saw someone peeking around the doorframe of the bedroom. It looked like my boyfriend, same height, same hair, just standing there looking at me. I figured he was joking around. Maybe he was trying to scare me or just being silly. But what happened next really shook me. When I walked back to the bedroom, he was in bed under the covers like he hadn't moved at all. I asked him why he was looking around the corner at me, and he looked confused. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. Then, yesterday, something else strange happened. I went out in the morning to get some coffee and do laundry. When I came back home, all the shoes from our shoe rack were on the floor. But they weren't thrown or knocked off. It looked like someone had carefully taken each pair off the rack and set them down on the floor one by one. At first, I blamed the shoes on our dogs. Maybe they got bored or were playing around while I was gone. But then I remembered one of our dogs is crate trained. He stays in his crate when we're not home. So, I went into the living room to check. And that's when I saw something really strange. His crate had been moved. Not just a little bit. It was all the way across the living room and pushed into the kitchen. That crate is heavy, and our dog has never moved it before. I don't even think he could if he tried. Both of the dogs were acting weird, too. They weren't just excited like when I usually get home. They were panicked, like something had scared them. That's when I started to feel really uneasy. I kept trying to find some kind of explanation, but nothing made sense. Later that night, when we were getting ready for bed, something happened that I still can't shake. I walked into the bedroom. The lights were dim, and I was about to grab something from the dresser. Then I glanced toward the closet and froze. I saw my boyfriend peeking at me from inside the closet. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, half hidden, watching me. My heart dropped. I called out his name, confused. But before I even finished speaking, he stepped out of the bathroom behind me. He hadn't been in the closet at all. I tried to tell myself maybe I was tired or just seeing things. But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. This weekend, I'm planning to smudge the house. Burn sage, open the windows, try to cleanse the space. I've done it before in other places when I felt something wasn't right. And sometimes, it helps. I've had strange experiences all through my life. Knocks, shadows, things moving. But this is different. It feels stronger, more direct, like it's trying to be seen. I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but it's starting to scare me. If anyone out there has had something like this happen or knows what this could be, I'd really appreciate any advice. I just want to understand what's going on. Or at least know I'm not the only one. This happened in the summer of 2010. I was 19 and my sister Emily was 17. Our family owned a farmhouse just outside of Fairfield, Iowa. It had been in the family for generations. Our grandmother had lived there most of her life. After she was gone, the place sat empty for a while. That summer, our parents decided it was time to clean it out. To see if anything needed fixing before it could be sold or rented. I remembered visiting as a kid, but I hadn't been there in years. Emily and I took the upstairs rooms. She got the one with the window facing the barn. I stayed in the smaller room near the attic door. On the second day, while helping Dad sort through the upstairs closets, I opened the attic. I climbed up with a flashlight and stepped inside. It was mostly empty boxes, some chairs, and a few old suitcases. In the far corner, next to a covered trunk, I saw a small plastic case. It was a camcorder, one of those handheld types from the late 80s or early 90s. Next to it was a labeled tape in a cracked hard shell. I took it downstairs and showed Emily. The handwriting seemed familiar. We found an old VHS player in the living room cabinet, and it still worked. We slid the tape in and pressed play. The footage started with a bit of static, then cleared up. It showed a bedroom we both recognized. The same farmhouse, same window frame, but it looked like it did decades ago. Then we saw her, our mom, maybe 15 or 16 at the time. She was dancing alone, swaying to some music we couldn't hear. She spun around once, laughing to herself. Then she turned and seemed to speak to someone just off camera, but there was no sound. Her smile faded quickly. She stepped backward. Her eyes were locked on something behind the camera. She didn't move for a long time, just stared. Then the image flickered, not like normal VHS static. This was a short blur that covered the corner of the screen. Something dark passed by just for a second. Emily leaned closer. She asked if I saw that too. And I did. Our mom stepped out of frame. The room stayed empty for several seconds. Then the camera shook slightly, like it was bumped, and the screen went black. Emily looked at me. Neither of us said anything right away. We both felt it. Something was wrong. Emily wanted to ask Mom about it. So that night, we kept the tape in my backpack. We returned home the next day. Later, when I showed it to Mom, she recognized it as soon as she saw it. Her expression shifted. She didn't ask questions. She picked it up and looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then she eventually confirmed it was recorded that summer. She had been 16. It was filmed inside the farmhouse, in her bedroom. She said it was the same night her younger brother disappeared. No one ever found out what happened to him. She told others he had probably run away, but she admitted she never believed that. Later that night, we watched the tape again. The video began the same way. She entered the frame and moved exactly as before. But this time, it ended early. There was no stare, no flicker, no movement in the corner. We tried again the next day, but the result was the same. That tape no longer shows what we saw in the farmhouse. But sometimes I think about the dark shape in the corner. And wonder how long it had been in that room before the camera started recording.